Today's podcast is brought to you by Cheeky, a line of bar-quality syrups and juices for the home. If you're someone who loves craft cocktails but does not love the work, Cheeky may be for you. Check out the core 8 flavors plus the newly released limited edition espresso syrup at cheekycocktails.co and enter the code Movers and Shakers at checkout for 10% off your first order. If you're a woman founder in food, beverage, and CPG, this message is for you. I'm excited to share that applications for the 4th annual Enthuse Foundation Pitch Competition are now open. This is your chance to compete for $35,000 in cash and prizes, including a grand prize of $10,000 in no-strings-attached cash. Follow in the footsteps of previous winners, including Cleos Mastia Spirit, Unfem Wines, Femly, BTR Nation, and Cocina 54 Empanadas. Visit enthusefoundation.org for more information and to apply. The application closes on Monday, October 3rd, 2022, so I highly recommend you check it out ASAP.
Movers and Shakers, the podcast about people and ideas that are changing the beverage landscape. Now here's our host, April Wachtel.
Hey, movers and shakers. It's your host, April Wachtel, and I'm so excited to share today's interview with Lance Winters and Dave Smith from St. George Spirits. Lance is the Master Distiller and Dave is the Head Distiller for St. George Spirits, one of the pioneer craft distilleries in the United States. Founded by Jorg Rupf in 1982, St. George originally distilled eau de vie, then birthed and sold the Hangar One brand and expanded their portfolio across categories to include base spirits like gin, vodka, and whiskey, as well as liqueurs and more esoteric offerings like Absinthe and Shochu. In the podcast today, we discuss how Lance and Dave have grown the brand organically with minimal startup funding, how they think about pushing the boundaries with craft spirits, how they consider the intersection between innovation and commercial opportunity, and their advice for entrepreneurs interested in launching a spirits brand. Lance and Dave are icons in the spirits industry, and it was such a pleasure having them on the pod. Without further ado, please enjoy my interview with Lance Winters and Dave Smith.
Hello. Good morning to both of you, Lance and to Dave. Thank you so much for joining me on the Movers and Shakers podcast. How are you today?
April, I'm speaking for myself. Doing great. Thank you for having us on the show.
Yeah, it's really happy to have some time with you here, and it's fun to do this when I can actually see people as well, rather than just being like floating voices out in the ether.
Totally. It's such a pleasure to have you. So let's do this way. It's been a little while since I've actually had two people on the pod, so maybe let's start with Lance on this one. I know that Jorg Rupf founded St. George in 82, and then he retired in 2010. You joined the business in 96. Maybe if you could just say in your own words, what drew you to St. George in the first place?
Jorg's reputation as someone who could take a piece of fruit and then create this perfect, faithful rendition of all the things that you love about that fruit in a glass. I thought that was an amazing thing and was such a stellar example of what it means to be a great, you can create a lot of different things in the distillation world. It's almost endless what you can do, but to be able to recreate something like that so faithfully is not an easy task. And as a brewer at the time when I learned about St. George, I desperately wanted to be able to learn from somebody who was just that good. And that's what drew me to Jorg initially and to St. George Spirits.
Right. So you are a nuclear engineer as well as a brewer. So can you speak to that sort of evolution from being an engineer and then deciding to completely change careers?
April, what do you love about this industry? It's such a social industry, right? And nuclear engineering, not super social. The parties tended to suck pretty bad. I love technology. I love science. They're both geekily cool, but you can take both of those things and overlay them in a lot of other processes, and suddenly you've got a recipe for something that is challenging from an intellectual standpoint, as well as rewarding from a social standpoint. Not a lot of things that you can make in a nuclear power plant that you can share with your friends during social time. But when you start brewing, you've got processes where you've got heat transfer and fluid flow, and then you throw some biology into it, which is even more fun. And then you take that up a notch with distillation, and you've got the heat transfer and fluid flow of a brewing cycle when you're making whiskey, and then heat transfer and fluid flow in distillation and all the ensuing chemical and physical processes that take place. And suddenly you've got something that's just a ton of fun, and then you can make things that hopefully will wow people. So it's an unbeatable combo, and I find myself, whenever I'm at the distillery and I'm running the stills, I find myself watching the stills and sort of having this virtual X-ray vision into the way that they work because of the 8 years that I spent in nuclear engineering, needing to do that exact same thing with a nuclear power plant that's covered with shielding and all kinds of things to protect you from not just heat but radiation. So it's been a really, really fun transition.
Lance, as you describe that, I almost see like the after school special kind of version of where it's like all like kind of like flat cartoony, and like all like the little power transfers are color coded and like little dots basically of things that are happening, moving around the energy systems.
That's Ms. Pac-Man, Dave.
Oh, that was Pac-Man.
Yeah,
I always get those two confused.
You just played a lot of video games as a kid.
And Dave, what about yourself?
You know, I came at this from a very different perspective. I've got a degree in creative writing, so I can write some short stories and screenplays about living on my friend's couch. I can write some short stories and screenplays about being a high school English teacher and realizing that I was spending a lot of my money on alcohol as I was teaching youth, and had an opportunity to come and learn about alcohol via my brother's winery. And I worked with him and a few other winemakers over a few harvests, and I knew just enough about fermentation sciences and cellar science to be vaguely dangerous at it. And there was a winemaker my brother was working for named Mike Dash, who at one point during one of my internships said, "Dave, do you know Lance and Jorg over at St. George?" And I knew of Lance and Jorg by reputation. Again, basically they were known as just being like wonderful individuals, and the spirits were absolutely beautiful. I had tried the pear eau de vie and the raspberry, the framboise, and it was just like kind of mind blowing. It's like, I have no idea how this comes to be. And Mike said, I know Lance is looking for someone over at St. George. They need some help over there. And Dave, you've got kind of a dark, fucked up sense of humor. I think you'd really get along with Lance. and so I eventually connected with Lance and had an opportunity. There's a very long story about how I got hired here. But I was like employee number 4 or 5, and my initial plan was to just be here for a year. I wanted to, wherever I was going to learn, and I found this entirely fascinating. Like, I just was really curious about it. But I figured I would come in and I would learn about distillation, and I would that's just like it kind of go. I add it to the grab bag as a writer, and I would just understand this, and I could write about it, and I'm going to use the wine industry to travel and write, and that was almost 18 years ago. I just fell down the rabbit hole. I fell in love with it. Enjoyed mentorship and friendship like I never experienced before, and I can't imagine my life any other way without St. George's and without Lance as part of it. And what I mean by all that is basically I learned how to. I had envisioned the life of being able to share an experience, to tell stories, to try to talk to people, and I had discovered a new way to express myself. I discovered a new way, a pathway of communication via spirits, and to tell stories in a way that I never had a language for before. And so, and as Lance describes it, it's something where it's a lot of science, and then it's also a lot of intuition and sort of heart that gets sort of all wrapped up together, and hopefully, if we're really true to ourselves, we're able to kind of balance out the best of our abilities in each of these kind of categories to really make something that's genuine and put something we love into a bottle.
So that actually preempts something that I was planning on touching on later in the conversation. But you hear every spirits brand saying distillation and blending, it's part art and it's part science. And on one hand, it's obviously true. And then on the other hand, it's a very sort of catchy marketing phrase. However, in your case, I'm wondering how much you think having a background in arts and sciences has really impacted the growth of the brand and the evolution of the brand. Because I would imagine having this diverse set of backgrounds has very much changed the course of the business.
I think that the art approach is a much more important part of the evolution of the brand. I think that science happens whether you're looking or not, whether you're paying attention or not. Science has been happening since way before we even came up with the word science. Everything is guided by it. But you don't need to understand it. You don't need to know the wavelength of light bouncing off of Titian yellow to know where that yellow belongs in a composition. And the place, there's one intersection for what we do and everybody else, and it's the human side of us, right? We all relate based on our noses and our palates, not on the science. We can geek out about the science, and a real spirits nerd is going to totally geek out on that, and it's great to be able to have the understanding and the language to be able to speak to them. But at the most basic, most important level, it's the humanistic side that we need to speak to, and the common language of that humanity for all of us is art, whether we choose to acknowledge that or not. And we are driven by our noses and our palates at St. George, and we want to find the things that just really turn us on. And that's what drives it. Now, the science helps to back that up by helping us find ways to execute that better and to make sure that when we produce something like that, it's got a great shelf life, that by the time you get a bottle in your hands and you pour that into your glass, you get the same human experience that we had when we put it in our glass, the thing that we wanted to deliver you, the message that we wanted to deliver you. And so that's the most important aspect. And I would say that the art is definitely much more important than the science. And that's from the heart, not from the marketing department.
Mm-hmm. I think I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but the majority of our listeners are bartenders, brand owners, aspiring entrepreneurs, suppliers, distributors. For this reason, I love to just give some context in terms of like timeline and like really sort of nail down state of the business at this point and this point. Lance, when you joined, what was the state of the business with Jorg? Was it still all eau de vie? Like, what was the distribution footprint?
It was a super cool that barely paid both of us. We were the only two in the business, and Jorg mostly handled accounts payable and accounts receivable. He'd come in once in a while. The bulk of what we made, we sold in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. You think back even to 96, there weren't a whole lot of people who were drinking high proof spirits neat, and eau de vie was basically designed to be consumed that way. Jorg also made some grappa. There was some grappa business that helped to support what we were doing. We had some liqueurs as well. Those were probably bigger sellers domestically than any of the eau de vies were. But that was basically it. And I showed up, we started laying down barrels of whiskey. And I thought for sure that our whiskey was going to take the world by, and lo and behold, it didn't. So moving forward a little bit, probably 4 years into my tenure there, so right around 2000, I had been out in the market and had seen this proliferation of flavored vodkas. And they were everywhere. And I'd go out to sell eau de vies with our California distributor, which at the time was the Henry Wine Group. Really great bunch of folks. We were sort of a strange little add-on for their portfolio. And I start seeing these flavored vodkas, and I'm like, I'm going to try one. And I tried one. I won't name the brand, but it was said to be a citrus flavored vodka, an orange flavored vodka. And I tried it, and it smelled first of bad ethanol and then of an air freshener approximation of oranges. I'm like, ooh, that's like drinking furniture polish. And the palate was the same. And I'm like, this is a mess. I went back to Jorg the next day at the distillery, and I said, look, there are these people that are out there, and they're selling this flavored vodka like there's no tomorrow. It's on every single shelf that I see, and it misses the mark. We're making eau de vies that smell and taste exactly like the fruit that they're made from, and nobody wants to buy them. The disconnect is purely language. And because eau de vie is a language that nobody speaks, and vodka is something that at the time everyone spoke, like, let's change the language that we're speaking and let's start making something like this. Let's start working with fruit that you can't make an eau de vie from, and we'll apply the same methodologies that we're using currently, and Hangar One was born. And that took off for us. And I know that you wanted to ask some questions about funding. We were able to get a bank loan, and I'll tell you, it was a $50,000 bank loan. And next to nothing, but for a small distillery who had made its name on, it's not very bankable. And yet we found a good bank that was able to lend us $50,000.
Just to put that in perspective, I think the first bank said no, and then we found a new bank that said yes, that you could pull it off.
Actually, Lance, just quickly, How much do you think it would cost to do the same thing today?
If we wanted to do it the same way, we could probably do it for close to the same. The problems right now would be more related to supply chain logistics. We were able to get glassware, we were able to get fruit. Nothing was a problem there. But we started very small, and this is something that's sort of part of our DNA at St. George Spirits. We tend to do things very organic. And by that, I mean, we don't try to push things. We want to create something and have pull through in the market drive where we're going. And at the time, I think that the first batches of Hangar One were just a couple hundred cases of each flavor. And they sold out very quickly, and we were able to start to use cash flow to be able to grow what we were doing, taking no profit out of it, but growing the cycles of our production. So we got to a place where we're producing 10,000 cases at a drop, 10,000 cases at a bottling, and it was all off of that initial $50,000 loan, and that's how we've grown since then. If I can jump ahead, I'll jump ahead to. It was probably, I'm not going to count how many years later. It was 11, 12 years ago when we ended up selling the Hangar One brand. That created enough of a cash infusion that Jorg was able to take his money. I was able to take the money that I had and purchase the rest of Jorg's shares, and then put more money into the business from that to be able to do the next of being able to hire a sales team, which we had never had until that point.
Wow.
Yeah, so we've gone through multiple cycles of being a startup distillery, and had to reinvent ourselves at a number of different turns.
Do you know what Jorg had to put into it to start? Because this is, again, we have so many people who are listening who are in the process of kind of taking their first steps and trying to understand, like, how much money do I need to get started? Or can I build a distillery on X dollars? Or do I need to work with a contract manufacturer and contract distiller? So just wondering kind of if you know anything about that period.
I know that he started with very little. He started with a single still that I'm reasonably sure he probably borrowed money from family to be able to. I'm going to come back and address the spirit of your question. And I think that what you start with depends on what you want to end up with. If you're an entrepreneur and you want to make money, you have to start with a lot of money. It's simple as that, especially if you want to make it quickly. If you're an artist and you want to make beautiful, compelling products, you can start with bare bones. You just have to. You don't have to have a lot of money. You have to have a lot of patience. You have to be willing to slog through. You have to be willing to take the time to educate. Why is this product compelling? We live in an industry that's been fairly static from 1933 when Prohibition was repealed to the birth of craft I won't even say the birth of craft distillation, because that was 40 years ago. It took 25 of those 40 years for the bulk of the public to catch up with it. And so it's really just the last 15 years that people have really gotten into those spirits, and they're still learning what the true value of a craft produced spirit is. Even the craft spirits producers are still learning what that should be. Because a lot of them think, if I'm the local version of Tanqueray, that's good enough. I say bullshit on that. I say you have to be your own version of whatever category you're stepping into. You have to have your own point of view that you're espousing. And if you don't have that unique point of view, you're fighting large brands on their terms, not yours.
Yeah, for sure. I had interviewed Eugene, who leads M&A for Diageo, maybe 2 years ago, and I had asked him how they thought about competition within their portfolio. And he was saying, we don't really view it like one whiskey against another whiskey. He said, because it's not just one of our brands being up against another brand of our own, right? There's a lot of other brands out there. And he said, I think that, like, the value of the brand is very much related to what makes the brand distinctive. So really, I think reinforcing what you just said. That being said, there's also really great brands and really great products out there that are less successful than others. So I'm wondering what you think explains the difference between these two. It's an amorphous question, I know.
Yeah, and I'm like, with any good amorphous question, I'm going to take it for what I think it means. And what I'll tell you is, most of the time it's timing. The market's often not ready for something. There have been some gins that I tried way back in my youth as a little tiny distiller. And when I tried them, I thought they were truly amazing. And they're gone now. Similarly, a handful of different vodkas, they're gone now. And they were amazing. And part of it is that it's timing. And then the other part of it is there's a lot of noise in this business. And the brands with the deepest pockets make the loudest noise, and they distract you from these soft, quiet, real, sincere messages. And if you can't hear those quiet, sincere messages, then they're totally lost, and they'll never get through to you, and they'll shrivel up on the vine.
Yeah. So I'm wondering what you think about sort of the intersection between innovation and really authentic, products, launching the things that you want to just because you think that they should live in the world, versus catching a sort of commercial opportunity. So we're seeing this with RTDs, for example, right now. We see every company that could possibly launch an RTD is doing so. And there's totally huge demand for it. But I also think in the relatively near future, a lot of them are going to start going away as well. So I'm kind of wondering if you have an opinion on like when it's right to kind of do what you did with the eau de vie and say, hey, they're not buying this, but their flavored vodka is having a thing. Like, how do you think about launching new products into that context?
How well can we execute? And when we execute on that, are we providing a wide enough departure from what's already being said that what we're saying is meaningful? And I believe that with all the Hangar One products that we launched, we were so dramatically different. One, because of the fact that we actually used fruit to make it, but two, because of the fact that when you picked up a glass of it, instead of going, oh, that's smooth, you went, oh, wow, holy fuck, what is that? I've never tried anything like that. That's, if we can deliver a wow factor, then that's when we'll make that call. But until we can wow somebody with it, we just won't enter into that category. So we don't have an RTD because there's no wow RTD that we've got at the moment.
Right.
Anytime a new category opens up or we look at one, it does provide a new play. But if we can't find a super fun game for that playground, then we'll go to a different playground.
Right. Totally. Yeah, so this is actually a great segue into, let's talk about your products themselves. You have what I would consider to be a portfolio of category transcendent products. You have everything from Absinthe and Shochu and eau de vie, all the way to vodka, to gin, to whiskeys, and so on. How do you make the decision to say, hey, I want to make a rum agricole, or hey, I want to make a shochu? Like, this is the product that we're going to launch.
Oftentimes it starts with a hatred of a category. I had some very bad experiences in the Navy with rum, and swore never to go back to rum. And I think anytime you write off a category entirely, there's something that needs to be explored there. And so we started playing with rum at the distillery, and I started playing with rum made from molasses and with different yeast strains, things like that. Couldn't find anything that was really, truly interesting. We played around with rums made from evaporated cane juice. Also not that interesting. When we rebooted and said, okay, how would an eau de vie maker approach making a rum? The only way to do it is an agricole style. And so we did what any self-respecting distiller would do. We shopped around for a cane mill and then found some people growing cane in California and purchased a bunch of cane and started crushing it. It is, from a manpower perspective, one of the most labor-intensive things that we do, and from a drinking perspective, one of the most rewarding. And so we decide to do it based on trying to learn a little bit more about our craft. I guess that's the most succinct way to put it. And what it ends up doing is teaching us a lot and showing us boundaries for what we do, and hopefully allowing us to discover something that we had never found before. And in this instance, it was one more opportunity for us to understand that alcohol is not the most important thing that you distill. The water that you're distilling is equally important. And in something like an agricole, that water comes up through the soil, goes into that plant, and it's changed by the plant. It lives in that plant. And it's a representation of the California sunshine and the terroir where it's grown, as well as the identity of the plant. And so you end up with something that has an earthiness, it has a grassiness, it has this black olive and truffle sort of character to it. It's really, really amazing, and there's no other way to be able to get those characteristics into a spirit. So it's really something that just helps to enrich who we are as distillers.
So probably about 96% of the world's rum is distilled from molasses. So a very small number of people in the world know what rum agricole is. So from an education perspective and from a distribution perspective, how has that experience been?
It's, again, a great learning experience and super rewarding. So I like to characterize our agricole, which we haven't made in years because of a shortage of harvest, but I would lay into it in a big way as soon as the harvest equipment is there. It is the Laphroaig or the Ardbeg of agricole rums. And because of that, it's truly polarizing. But polarizing is equal parts good and bad, right? If you love our rum, there's no other rum that will suffice. If you love Ardbeg or Laphroaig, there's no other whiskey that's going to suffice for you. And so it's just a matter of finding the 1 in 10 rum drinker that loves a really super funky agricole. And once you've found that person, you've got them for life. If you've got something that is super beige and super boring as a rum, you're going to fight to keep them every day. You're going to fight to keep your consumer every single day against other beige ones that are selling a different, cooler lifestyle than yours. I can't compete on that. I have to compete. We have to compete. Sorry, Dave. We have to compete on flavor and aroma. That's where we start.
Right. Do you process a huge amount of your raw materials at the distillery?
Yeah.
Like I was reading up on your coffee liqueur, and I saw that you were initially using a coffee mill, and then you had to switch the machinery that you're using for that.
We and it's one of these things that will we try to as a project kind of grows, we try to hold really true to what's the heart, what's the intention, and how to really, to Lance's point earlier, it's about executing at a really high level. And so with coffee grinding, there's basically a burr grinder. It doesn't generate a lot of heat while you're grinding, which in turn would damage, it would distort the flavors, the aromatics of the coffee that's there. And then a burr grinder, when we were first starting out the NOLA project, and I knew we had we're going to be grinding 1,200 pounds of coffee. We don't have the equipment for that. I don't have a burr grinder that's going to suffice. So I reached out to some local coffee folks and asked to borrow their equipment. And they said, yeah, of course, love to help you out. Went and picked up these burr grinders. I got 4 of them from a coffee roastery. And these things are still like tabletop models. And I'm looking at them and immediately thinking this is going to take us 2 days to grind all the coffee. It's still going to get really hot. We're not executing at the right level. And I think Lance had the brilliant idea of using our mill, what we'd normally use to mill grains. And we could adjust the settings on it, and it's oversized. And so the key there is that's a very non-traditional way to grind our coffee beans, but it's also one that executes at a high level and that it accomplishes the goal. It's so oversized for this project that it does it efficiently, and it doesn't generate really any heat at all in that process. And so it works really beautifully so that we can have a really good grind for a cold brew style coffee for all of our infusions before distillation and all that. With it. From a raw materials standpoint, though, as we're bringing in sugarcane, even things like pears, we've got chili peppers going on the pot. And so it's as we work with raw ingredients, it's all about the harvest. And sometimes those things can be weeks late, sometimes they're weeks early. You're kind of honor bound, and your entire responsibility is to respond to what nature's giving you. And whatever its timing is, it's going to be its timing, and then you figure out how to do your best work with that. And so we'll go right from peppers into pears. Hopefully raspberries this year, hopefully some apple. So we'll be right on through raw materials here.
So I was actually going to ask you about the green chili vodka. By the way, it's delicious. I'm obsessed with savory flavors, and I find it to be very surprising that there's not more ubiquitous savory, classic or contemporary classic savory cocktails. So it was absolutely delicious.
Thank you.
Huge fan. Of course. Wondering how terrible it is at the distillery when you are distilling the peppers. Is it everywhere, getting in people's eyes?
I'll say that I think we both have some stories to. There's a lot of stories here, but when we're actually distilling it, it's actually okay. It's not too bad. When we do our initial grind on the peppers, when we bring the peppers in and we can put them through a machine we affectionately call the mangler, which is like a Cuisinart that's about as big as I am. But when we grind them up, we've got a 65,000 square foot retired naval aircraft hangar, and it was early on maybe like our third harvest with the peppers, and at that point I had my 1-year-old son, and we're 150 feet away from where the peppers are being ground. We're up on the mezzanine level, way far away, and I've got this baby in my arms, and my proud papa, I got my baby at work, and I have this brief moment of smelling the air and going, oh, we're grinding. Those peppers are yeah, that's a good. We're on today. It's happening. And then my son starts going. Oh no! And I'm like, oh, I'm a terrible father. I got to get out of here. But so much of it is the capsaicin, the chemical, that some of that basically chemical is just volatilized immediately. When we're actually soaking it in high proof alcohol, there's really no significant aromatics that are escaping the tank or anything like that. So it's fine. And then during the distillation process, the entire process is based on that capture of all of that. We're trying to keep that all together. And then the capsaicin, the chemical heat in the pepper, actually stays in the still pot. Its boiling point is below that its boiling point is above that of even the water. So it basically stays in the still pot, and all that heat stays with the peppers and what we sort of are the leftovers after distillation's done.
Gotcha. And how often do you distill, for example, the green chili vodka, or you'd said you were doing the pear eau de vie or pear brandy?
They're
once a year.
Yeah, they're both once a year since they're agricultural products.
Got it. Wow. Amazing.
So all of that work from a planning perspective is really important to us, to think about everything in these like 15 to 18 month cycles, to say whatever peppers we bring in now, this is all of our green chili production for the next, until at least 15 months from now, when I get through another harvest, we can actually work on processing, bring more in, get through it and make more green chili. There is no more. Like if suddenly this thing blows up, we have to carry enough excess inventory so that we're kind of constantly thinking forward like that.
Totally. How many states are you distributed in at this point?
About 40, yeah.
Okay, gotcha. So how did COVID impact your business? We know, again, probably every listener to the podcast knows that the on-premise more or less shut down for an extended period of time. And then there's been a lot of ensuing supply chain challenges. So we'd just love to hear a little bit about.
Yeah. So when COVID first hit, and we saw that all of our on-premise friends were getting hit as hard as they were, we were devastated first by that, because our family, our extended family, is the industry family, and anytime one is hurting, we're all hurting, and that was devastating. Then the next part was, we looked and we said, oh, holy shit, we are 60% on premise. We're gonna lose 60% of our revenue. By the end of the first year of COVID, we were essentially flat, which any other year, if we're flat, I would say that we're doing something very, very wrong. But that year, finishing basically flat was amazing. It was a great learning experience for us. It showed us that from a consumer level, there's an amazing brand loyalty to the things that we produce. The fact that people were willing to, we didn't pivot anything. All of our customers pivoted, and they started going to liquor stores, buying stuff. And you think about it from a psychological standpoint. The world's going to shit, and your life is changing dramatically. You need touchstones for normalcy. What is a touchstone that's easy to get? Let's make a cocktail at home. Let's feel fancy. You know what? I'm going to throw on a bow tie and a tuxedo, and I'm going to sit at home and have a delicious martini, and I'm going to pretend that I'm somewhere I'm not. I'm going to pretend I'm someone I'm not, and I'm going to escape from all this horribleness that has become daily life. And I have a feeling there was a lot of that went on, and I'm just very grateful that so many consumers made us a part of that routine, or a part of that ritual. And so we ended up finishing out that year basically flat. The following year, best year that we've ever had. So we've been able to ride this very well. We are quite fortunate in as much as, again, our consumer is fantastic. We also have an excellent sales. They are flexible, they are talented, and they are nonstop.
And I think I'd even say in the sales team, obviously did extraordinary work for, COVID, for circumstances and what is just shifting realities out there. Like our entire operations team, production, warehouse, office, just everyone here. This is going to sound a little canned, and I apologize for it, but it's like everyone here like wears a St. George heart in their sleeve. Like we love each other like family, and we fight like roommates but it all comes from like a place where we really care about this. Like you fight over something because it's meaningful to you. And what we're all trying to do together, that shared effort, is we make things that we really do love and care about, and we're trying to put them out into the world and share them with others. And during COVID, to Lance's point, even thinking about all the industry noise out there, if you will, there's no brand plan, there's no business plan that can account for COVID, or much less have a reliance on discovering such a deep loyalty in someone who couldn't get a terroir martini at their local bar. So they went to their local, basically mom and pop liquor store and said, "Can you please bring this in?" And we were, to Lance's point, we're just incredibly grateful and appreciative of having that impact on people, to be able to provide something during such a dark time.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had a lot of conversations about, I don't know if you followed this so much, but there have been numerous batches of direct-to-consumer brands that have just paid to grow really fast. Like they've gotten, as you were saying, Lance, a huge amount of money at the outset, grown super fast, and then they couldn't raise funding, and then their consumer base dried up. And I think this is one of those interesting things where you do have to create loyalty. You have to create a real affinity for the brand in order for it to be able to withstand unpredictable circumstances, if, funding dries up, if debt is harder to find. So yeah, I'm obviously so happy for you that worked out.
Yeah. Obviously, neither Dave nor I is George Clooney or Ryan Reynolds. So we actually have to rely on making good product and getting it out there and getting loyalty that way, instead of based on our stunning looks.
That actually brings me to a question that I wanted to ask. Lance, I know I read an interview where you had talked about agave spirits, and you felt conflicted about working with agave spirits and producing agave spirits. And I wanted to ask you, and obviously feel free to add more detail to this, but you had mentioned that you loved working with it. It was a very challenging material to work with, but you felt conflicted because you felt like there was some element of appropriation there. And what I'd love to know, especially in the context of all of these celebrity tequila brands that have been launching in particular, kind of where do you think the line is there, or how do you consider that fine line between what is an assimilation of cultures or what could be appropriation?
I'm still not 100% sure, April. What the thing that I am certain about is that the appropriation involved in celebrity brands is, I don't know, it's sort of annoying. I don't want to come out swinging at any other brands in particular, but it's like, what actual value is that celebrity's presence bringing to this product other than recognition? And they're not making it a better product. They're just making it something that you're buying because you want to be closer to that. They're not necessarily people who are experts in even knowing what a good spirit is. All that said, coming back to agave spirits here in the States, certainly, especially here in California. I recently Dave and I both went to an agave symposium, California Agave Symposium at UC Davis. And one of the things that's sort of fascinating and wonderful about agave is that farmers in this state, where we're running out of water as we speak, farmers can grow a crop that's a high value crop here with fewer acre feet of water, and be able to make as much money as they are off of more acre feet of water. And so it becomes a very compelling economical and ecological argument for the state of California. Obviously, the agave is not going to go back down to Mexico to be able to make an agave spirit. I think that if we can create something that is compellingly different here in the state of California from agave, then maybe there is an argument for it. I'd actually love to hear more agaveros from Mexico weigh in on the issue, because we're starting to see it in South Africa. We're starting to see agave being grown in places like Australia and definitely here in California. And I know it's, back in the day, there was no border, and a lot of the native peoples of North America were harvesting agave, cooking it in pits, and then using it as a food source. And so both north and south of what is now the border between the U.S. and Mexico, that has been taking place. So maybe there is a future for it, and maybe there's a compelling reason for it. But I'd love to have that conversation openly and gauge the feelings of everybody involved.
Dave, anything to add there?
I as much as I would love to add something to it, but I think Lance has really hit it on the head. It's one of those things that we're really mindful and thoughtful about it, and we've been, as we worked with agave over 15 or 16 years now. It's something where it's sort of been an internal conversation, and I think we'd love to be able to engage in that in a more external, just really honest conversation, because it's something where we are seeing the landscape, as Lance said, economically and literally the landscape of California change around us. And it starts to change some of the arguments or the necessity for something like this.
Yeah, totally. So St. George is obviously a well-known brand, beloved brand. You're both very accomplished. What keeps you up at night these days?
Are we going to talk about my children again? Yeah. Go ahead.
It's just uncertainties in the marketplace, uncertainties in the world, where we've got economic uncertainty, we've got things like pandemics. I believe very, very firmly in our ability to execute on what we're doing, to continue making the things that we're making, and to keep having new ideas. So within our four walls, I have no concerns. We've got an amazing team, and we know what we're doing. It's outside those walls. It's again, uncertainties with the economy and with just what goes on with people. Can we withstand another 2.5 years, another 3 years of COVID? I don't know. So yeah.
Hopefully we don't have to.
Yeah, hopefully. But yeah, not a lot keeps me awake at night.
Good, that's great. So what do you feel like you still need to accomplish? Because again, you've got such beautiful products, you've established an amazing business.
God, well, now that the James Beard Foundation has taken my category away, there's no chance of actually winning the James Beard Award, so we'll take that off the table. What I'd like to do is flip the script on both Clooney and Reynolds and become a major action hero, a movie star. Yeah, I think that's it.
Okay. I think you can get those like little figurines made, on 3D printers pretty easily. So
perfect. All over it. I'll get a little action figure. Yeah.
I was going to add something on to that, and I think actually one of the things that it keeps me awake at night at this point is actually it's excitement also. Outside of what Lance is, there's the uncertainties, the operational, logistical, emotional, political, socioeconomic, let's run down the list of all the uncertainties that are outside of these walls. But a lot of what keeps me awake at night is actually it's excitement. It's thinking about every one of these projects. It's everything we've been doing for years and years now. And also feeling that sort of that itch, that sense of like, there's other things that would be fun to explore. There's other, categories, there's other spirits. We're currently working on our 40th anniversary whiskey, which is the kind of thing that I love it at the beginning of the process. In the middle of the process, I absolutely hate it, and I'm kicking myself the entire way through. And then towards the end, when I start to feel like we're starting to understand it, I think I see the best version of this. I start to feel relief again, and there's so many of these projects that we have just sort of waiting in the wings as well. So it's exciting when you are in a mindset of growth and creativity, and sort of feeling that part of your soul sort of it's fulfilling when you're in that place. And that's the exciting thing that keeps me up at night these days.
Yeah, I love it. So as you know, our listeners are very trade focused. What advice might you have for let's say, two types of people. People who are considering starting a venture of their own, and then maybe some people who have something up and going and they're trying to transition from being a really scraggly startup to being a little bit more established. Any thoughts for either of those?
Sure. If you're just starting up, ask yourself why it is you're getting into this business. I really want somebody's reason for wanting to get into this business, that they love spirits and they have an idea for a spirit that they want to make that nobody's made yet. If your reason is that for the last couple of decades you've seen double-digit growth in the category, get the fuck out. We don't need you. But if you're there because you have a love for it, welcome my brother or my sister. You're part of the club, and you will help the industry grow and get better. Dave, you want to take the other side?
The thing that I always kind of go to here is simply that, and it's part of the heartstring of St. George, of what's driven us for 40 years, and it's this sort of laid in by Jorg making eau de vie in a time when, during the 80s, when basically the white wine spritzer is a good cocktail that counts. But it's just put some more ice cubes in it as you go, you'll be fine. The idea though is that over and over again, we've, to some degree selfishly, we make things for ourselves. We make things for our own table. We make things for our friends and our families. And if there's commercial success attached to it, we're excited and grateful for that. And we'll try to make as much as we can to share. Great examples of that are like our baller single malt started out as a 50 case project for our friend's ramen shop. And I think last year we hit close to 6,000 cases or so with that. And we worked hard to scale that using all the same methodologies, everything so it's genuinely, it stays true to itself. Growth for the sake of growth is kind of bullshit and nonsense. It's what this is all about, is just making things that we really do care about and we want to share with the world. And so anyone who's trying to get into this industry, to Lance's point, it's the why. Ultimately, you make things for yourself. And if no one else likes it, you better be okay with that. You got to be okay, because you are going to have cases and cases of this thing, pallets and pallets, that are going to be sitting there that no one else wants to drink but you. And so you better be able to celebrate it and absolutely love it. And if you can't do that, then you need to think really hard about what you're trying to make, what you're trying to put out into the world, what you're trying to put on someone else's table, if it's not your own. I kind of look at that as a failed concept at that point. And it could be commercially successful, but that to me is incredibly dangerous. I don't want to ever be left with something that I don't care about and that no one else cares about. That's like the description of selling out, if you will.
Right.
April, if I could provide a follow-up to my own answer, I just want to say that the other thing that I would say to somebody who's getting into the business: be your own worst critic. You don't want somebody else to. The last thing you want to do is think that you made a great product because your mom said that it tastes just like gin, and you put it out and it's going to get slammed by everybody else. You need to make sure that what you've put out is your single best effort. And we are harsh with ourselves at the distillery, and we go through round after round of tasting to make sure that something is just where we want it. And I think that's a huge part of what's helped us. I mean, we've got a reputation that's been built over the course of 40 years at this point. And every year it gets more difficult to maintain that. Every year it's statistically harder and harder to stay that I won't say perfect, but to stay on top of things that well. So you need to be very, very harsh with yourself. In terms of somebody who's at it, who's scrapping through it, I can't emphasize the importance enough of having your own sales team. Nobody's going to tell your story better than your own people will. They will. You bring them in, you share your passion with them. They take that passion out onto the streets. And never underestimate the value of great bartenders. And I'm not suggesting through like brand ambassadorships. Just they become all of our foot soldiers out there. If you can win them over with a product and show them that it's going to make a better version of a cocktail for them, then they will sing your praises. And that third party attribute is a much more valuable one than you saying great things about yourself.
Sure, totally. Actually, to what you just said, Lance, and Dave, what you were saying earlier, I also think if you don't hate what you're making at some point, you just don't care enough. Because I really do think it's always an emotional roller coaster. So I love that you included that. Lance, Dave, where can people find you in St. George on
Instagram? We are St. George Spirits.
ST Jorg Spirits, and definitely check out our website. It's brand new. It's just sort of relaunched, and it's absolutely beautiful. As much as I hate to compliment ourselves, but it really is. It's really lovely.
And is that stgeorgespirits.com, Dave?
That is stgeorgespirits.com.
Do we have a Twitter account, Dave?
We do. It's ST Jorg Spirits, St. George Spirits. It's actually like we're consistent. Lance, do you have an email address? Should I say that right now also?
Nope, I don't have an email address or a phone number. I am patently unreachable.
Thank you so much to you both for coming on. This was such a pleasure to speak to you. And have a wonderful day. Talk to you soon.
Yeah, April, thank you so much. Great to be able to chat with you.
Yeah, really
Cheers.
appreciate you. Take care.
Thank you for listening to Movers and Shakers. Follow us on all social media at Movers S Shakers.